Well, hello and welcome. My name is Simone, and I'm the founder and leader of Women on the Rise, which is a women's healing and restoration ministry where we take a close look at different women of the Bible and we sort of parallel our own lives to theirs and use that as a backdrop that we can learn different things, and in some sort of intricate way the Holy Spirit uses this, and he's the one that brings about the healing. So we've been doing our theme for this year is walking in freedom, and today our specific title is freedom from insecurity or insecurities, with the subtitle being Troubled to Triumphant. And today we took a look at two women that they're a great example to use when we're talking about insecurity, because they both struggled, though differently, they both struggled just as much as the other one in this area. We see where Leah struggled because she was looking for the love of Jacob because he didn't love her. And Rachel struggled because she was desperate to have children and couldn't. And so the Bible, specifically, I'm looking at Genesis chapters 29 through chapter 31, where we see a good portion of the story with Leah and Rachel. So we see there where these two women, two sisters, they were sisters, that they were battling, not outwardly, could be more so internally, but again, one for Jacob's love, because Jacob ended up marrying both, not by his choice. His choice was Rachel. But he ends up, because of a deceptive plan of his uncle Laban, he ends up marrying Leah. And just to go back a little bit to kind of lay the foundation a little bit. This all starts from when Jacob is fleeing his brother Esau, because his brother Esau made a vow that he was going to kill him. So because of that, Rebecca, their mom, tells Jacob he needs to go to your uncle Laban until Esau calms down. Now, what did Jacob do that was so upsetting to Esau? Well, it starts with first, he took his birthright. Though Esau gave it to him for a pot of soup, nonetheless, he took his birthright. But then later on, when Isaac, his dad, wanted to give Esau a blessing, through Rebekah, Jacob disguised himself as Esau to get Esau's blessing. So, of course, after Esau finds this out, he is livid and vows to kill him. So, fast forwarding now, Jacob now flees and he gets to his uncle Laban. He first meets Rachel, his daughter, at a well, because she was a shepherdess taking care of her dad's sheep. And so she meets Jacob there. And at that well, that's where Jacob first meets her. He kisses her and he breaks down and cries. The Bible doesn't necessarily tell us why he does these things, but we can figure maybe it's because she is his kin. So he greets her with a kiss. And as far as him breaking down and crying with all the emotion, built up emotion of fleeing and then finally get into a place where he's with his family and he's in a place of safety. Maybe it could have just been a release of all this emotion. So nonetheless, his uncle Laban comes to see him, greets him with the same thing, a kiss, and they all go back to the house. The Bible tells us that he tells him everything, what happened, and he stays with his uncle Laban for about a month before he finally says to him, just because you're my nephew, it doesn't mean that you have to work for me for free. So it sounds like Jacob was taking care of his animals, his sheep and goats and so forth prior to. But then he says, what can I do? What can I pay you? And so Jacob then takes the opportunity to say, I'll work 7 years for you to marry your daughter Rachel. So that's agreed upon. And so the Bible also tells us that those 7 years were but a few days. It just felt like a few days. And you can imagine why. Rachel being a shepherdess, and he's shepherding his uncle Laban's sheep. It wasn't even like work. They're together, enjoying each other. Yeah, you can only imagine. So at the end of that 7-year period, Jacob goes to his uncle and says, I'm ready. Can give me my wife now so that I can, be a husband to her, so they can do what married folks do. And so he does that. He throws together a big banquet feast, what we would call today the wedding. And at the wedding night, when it was time for the bride to go into the wedding chambers, Laban devises this plan that he's going to switch out his daughters. So instead of it being Rachel, who Jacob is expecting that's going to be there, it turns out to be her sister Leah. And the Bible describes Leah as having weak eyes, soft eyes, tender eyes. So, and some people say that, it could have meant that she was ugly. Or it could have meant that just like what it says in the Hebrew text, that the word rakat, as it is in Hebrew, it translates to tender. It translates to soft. It translates to that tender, the weak side of it. So it doesn't necessarily mean she was ugly. It could have been she was maybe perhaps just average looking in comparison to her beautiful, gorgeous sister, as the Bible describes her as beautiful in face and form. So it could have been that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she was ugly per se. However, saying all of that, she is not the one that Jacob chose. So with that being said, Jacob is livid. He goes to his uncle Laban and he says, why did you do this to me? Why did you deceive me and give me Leah instead of Rachel, who I worked 7 years for? And his uncle's answer to him was, well, in our custom and in our tradition, we don't marry, the younger one doesn't marry before the older one. So the older one had to be married before the younger one. So he says, but if you would finish out the week, like the honeymoon, we would call it a honeymoon in today's time. But back then it was just like the honeymoon. So he would finish out that week with Leah to celebrate the wedding. And after that, at the end of that week, he would then give him Rachel. And then in exchange for giving him Rachel, he would then Jacob would work for him for another 7 years. So that would mean a total of 14 years he would be working. So Jacob agrees, and all is said and done. He marries Rachel, and he gets to take her as his wife. The Bible then tells us that God saw that Leah was not loved, that Jacob did not love her. So because of that, God opened her womb, but Rachel's remained closed. And in doing so, Leah then has several children. She has first Reuben, then she has Simeon, then she has Levi, then she has Judah. It wasn't until Judah, because in every child she had, she named them those names relative to Jacob loving her, because that's what she sought most, was Jacob to love her. But when it came to Judah, that was the first time she said, this time I will praise God. So that for Leah was a turning point. So she went from focusing only on Jacob and trying to get Jacob to love her, doing things to get him to love her, to focusing on God and praising God. So that was a big turning point. That was a triumphant moment for her, if you will. And so Rachel notices that her sister's having all these children. I'm assuming she must have been trying with no success. And so she's upset. She goes to she goes to Jacob, and she said, give me children or I will die. That's her words. Jacob gets upset with her, and Jacob says, am I God? Am I God that closed your womb? And so Rachel then says within herself, you know what? I am going to give my handmaid, because Uncle Laban gave both of his daughters maidservants when they got married. So Zilpah was given to Leah, and Bilhah was given to Rachel. So Rachel decides to take Bilhah and give her to her husband, so that in hopes that through her, she could start a family with Jacob. So she does that, and Bilhah gets pregnant, and she has first Dan, and then she has another another son that Rachel names Naphtali. Dan meaning that God is judged and obviously found favor with her, and Naphtali meaning I have wrestled with my sister and I've won. So those were the two sons from Bilhah. But then Leah, seeing that she's not having any more children, said, okay, I'm going to give my maidservant now. So she in turn gives Zilpah. Do you see what's going on with these two sisters? So she gives Zilpah, and Zilpah has two sons as well. So Zilpah's two sons, one is named Gad, meaning good fortune, and the other is named Asher, because Leah thought he brought her happiness, so she named him Asher. So there was two sons that Zilpah also has. So after all this now, this is around the time of the wheat harvest. And the Bible tells us that Reuben, Leah's firstborn son, he's out in the fields. And while he's there, he finds mandrakes. Mandrakes is a type of plant that has several uses, but one being fertility. So Rachel sees these mandrakes, and she says to Leah, Leah, please give me your son's mandrakes. And Leah, the Bible tells us, gets a bit upset because she says, it's bad enough that you've taken my husband. Now you're trying to take my son's mandrakes too. So she gets a bit upset. But Rachel then says to her, well, okay. So what I'll do is, if you give me your son's mandrakes, you can go and sleep with Jacob tonight. And so said, so done. So Jacob comes home, and guess who's there ready, that comes out to meet him and says, "Woo, here I am. I've hired you tonight." And so she obviously must have prayed for God to open her womb to allow her to have more children, because the Bible tells us she gets pregnant. And she names the son she has Issachar. Issachar meaning hired. So whenever you call Issachar, it was, "Hi, hired." But yeah, that was his name, hired. So then after having Issachar, she then has another son named Zebulun. Zebulun meaning gift. So he was a gift. After all of that, the Bible tells us that God remembered Rachel. And it's at that point that Rachel gets pregnant and gives birth to Joseph. And she names him Joseph because she wanted him to add another. So that's the story of, at this point, and let me just go back. That's the history of the sons. But Leah has one more child, and that's Dinah. So after she gave birth to Zebulun, she then had a daughter named Dinah. So Leah physically gave birth to 6 sons and 1 daughter. And of course, we know that she had the 2 from her maidservants, which gives her a total of 9. And then Rachel, later on, she goes to have that additional son that's named Benjamin. So she has 2 that came from her, but then also had 2 from her maidservant. So we see there that that's the 12, which is the 12 tribes of Israel, and 1 daughter. Okay, so after having Joseph, Jacob wants to leave. And to quickly go through that, Laban doesn't want him to leave, obviously, because everything was flourishing. Everything was flourishing. Not only crops, but his animals, everything was flourishing because of God's hand on Jacob. So he says, name your price, and I will, I'll match it. I'll do what you say. So Jacob says, no, I don't want anything from you. Only one thing. Let me go through all your flocks, and let me take out all the ones that are speckled and that are streaked, or have spots on it, and that are streaked and that are dark. Because, back then, the sheep should have been white, goats were dark. So if there was any spot or streaks on the goats, or if the sheep came out dark, then it usually meant there's some sort of defect on them. So he says, give me all of those, and you keep the plain colored ones, the solid colored ones. And so they agreed. But no sooner do they make this agreement does Laban go send his sons to go and take out every single spotted, streaked, and dark animal. No sooner do they make this agreement. And then he says to his sons, take them so far that it's a 3-day distance. So what did that mean? So that there would be no chance of the animals mating. And so I guess Laban's whole thought process was so that Jacob could have nothing. But that was okay, because God's hand was on Jacob. So what Jacob did is he took something called poplar, and he kind of shaved it back a little bit. And when he shaved it, he put it in the watering troughs. So every time the animals would come and drink, somehow, well, we know it's God's hand on him, the babies would come out spotted, would come out streaked, or would come out dark. And so it was total opposite. Laban was getting very few, and his were weak, while Jacob's was plentiful and strong. So while this was all going on, Jacob overhears Laban's sons saying, Jacob has come and taken everything from our dad and gotten rich from him. And so Jacob, hearing this, he gets a little bit, he was uneasy because he realizes that Laban isn't as nice to him anymore. So in all of this, God speaks to Jacob and tells Jacob to leave there and go home. Go back to his dad, and to do that immediately. So what the Bible tells us is that Jacob calls his 2 wives into the field, I'm assuming so they could have privacy, and he tells them all that was going on as far as working for their dad and how he was and what he was doing, so forth, and how he's changed his pay and how he's tried to hurt him, but God has always blessed him nonetheless. And so the daughters, here's the triumphant moment for the daughters, because both wives at that point, they both unite, they unify, and they decide they're going to stand and support their husband. And they said, well, our dad has only treated us like property. Okay. And even the price that was paid for us, he didn't even give it to us. He spent it. So they're thinking, because of the wrong that their dad has done to them, they're ready to go. So they both agree, they both unite, and they both go and stick by Jacob. So I'll end on this note. We see all that the wives went through because of their insecurities. They were maybe not outwardly at war where they were bickering and saying ugly things to each other, but by their actions, their competitiveness, and it was all due to the insecurity, again, of one wanting the love and the other wanting children. Because of that, the insecurity was high, or their insecurities was high, and it caused them to do all sorts of things. But God will take whatever messes, whatever we do, as he did with them, because that was just a mess. God's perfect plan is 1 man, 1 woman. And here we are with Jacob having 4 wives. And as we learn today, it was a mess. But God took that mess and brought a miracle out of that, because it's the 12 tribes of Israel that comes from not 1, but both women and their maids. Let's not forget that. So it's all 4 of those women God used and took them with the heading and the title of Leah and Rachel, because their servants were under them. So with the heading of Leah and Rachel, to be what formed and created the 12 tribes of Israel. So I leave you today with this question. Who are you most like? Are you most like Leah? Can you relate more to Leah, or can you relate more to Rachel? When you're by yourself, ask yourself these questions, because insecurity is not something that people like to talk about. People will deny it and will cover it up all day long. But when you're by yourselves, ask yourself, am I like Leah or am I like Rachel? And then ask yourself why. And that's something that God, through the Holy Spirit working in you and working that out through you, can get to those places if you allow him to heal. So until next time, be blessed.